Good evening, good afternoon, good morning for some perhaps. We're very delighted to include all of you in the launch of our fourth annual Gobeshona Global Conference. So I'd like to thank all of you for taking the time. We're starting this off here in Bangladesh, and it's a Friday, which is a weekend and a holiday. So I'm very grateful for quite a lot of our participants taking time in their off time to join us and launch the conference with us. So before we get into our esteemed panel and our speakers who've given a little bit of time to join us and talk about some of their initiatives and the way they're engaging in the Gobeshona platform, I'd like to go over a little bit of the history of how our conference series has started. So we have a little bit of an idea about what it is that this conference platform is trying to achieve, some of the things that we've tried over the years that have been a little bit experimental and how we can tweak it to make it better, and what are some of the new things that we'll be trying to focus on this year and going forward throughout 2024. So if we could have the slides, please. Momentary lag, sorry for that. There we go. So as you can see, we're on the fourth year for our global conference series. So it's focusing primarily on monitoring locally led adaptation and resilience. So this is a series that we've become global because we've been online since the pandemic, and we've been able to include quite a lot more participation and a lot more involvement from local communities in talking about the adaptation initiatives that they're taking, which is a very pivotal area of the conference series that we've identified doesn't necessarily get translated into quite a lot of the global discourses that are happening. So next slide, please. One of the reasons that we focused on this area is, for those of you that are familiar, our founder and director, Dr. Salimul Haq, sadly had passed away in October last year. And we at our ICAD organization and our family here have been working really hard at looking at some of the areas and platforms that he had initiated, some of the research activities, some of the capacity building activities, and a lot more of the youth and mentorship activities that were really pivotal to quite a lot of the work that he had spent throughout his career championing and working towards. And as you can see, as I mentioned, the tagline for it is focusing on locally led adaptation. Those are some of the areas that was very, very pivotal for a lot of his work in the latter years of focusing on how we can get leadership from the local communities to be the champions for the adaptation and resilience activities that are happening within their district, within their countries. Next slide, please. So for those of you that aren't familiar, the tagline for the conference is Gobeshona, which is the Bangla word for research. And it initially started off as a physical conference that used to be hosted here in Bangladesh at the university that we're based at, Independent University, Bangladesh. And it was about trying to enhance the level of research that comes from the Global South with researchers from the Global South. So when we first started our initiative back in 2014, we did an analysis and an assessment looking at the level of research that is being talked about and discussed about it, like countries of Bangladesh, similar to other LDCs and small island states and indigenous communities as well, at looking at the level of research that were actually being generated from the locals. And surprisingly, there was a very low number of actual research papers, articles, blogs, or journals that were done from institutions and organizations from the Global South. There was a lot being discussed about Global South activities. There was a lot being done in the research of what happens in various different LDCs, but very few of those research papers and articles were actually enhancing local researchers and local institutions. And so the platform that we had established, Gobeshona, focusing particularly on enhancing how Global South researchers and academics could engage in talking about the work that they're doing in their own nationality, in their own context, and what is the way that we can take that forward into the global perspective, into peer-reviewed articles and journals, and being able to get local researchers talking about their own context and publishing internationally. Unfortunately, during the pandemic, we had a little bit of a break on the physical convening of the conference. We weren't able to bring everybody together to have a big convening, as you can see from some of our previous ones above. So we shifted to an online modality. And since then, we've been able to open it up to becoming a global conference, not just one focused physically here in Bangladesh, but looking at the type of research and the quality of leadership from local activities and local communities in adaptation and resilience across the globe, learning from the global south as well as global north institutions that are working on these areas in adaptation research, and being able to foster connections and networks between ourselves. Next slide, please. So the tagline for our conference is monitoring locally led adaptation and resilience. And with that, we bring some objectives, which we hope is something that a lot of our contributors and partners who have greatly added to the sessions this year adds to the area of work that we're building on. Not just having research built for the purpose of having publications and journals printed, working in silos, but looking at how these knowledge products and research products can cross-fertilize, can give inspiration to other people, can give innovations and ideas to people in similar contexts, but across the globe in different areas, and make it really, rather than just a scholars and an academics area of contributing to research, bringing in practitioners, bringing in communities, and getting them to be involved in active research, not just publishing for the sake of publication, but using our knowledge and our experiences from practical projects, practical experiences, and developing research that can be put to use, research into action, as we highlight. And over the years, with some of the areas that we've been focusing on, monitoring and learning from the principles of locally led adaptation, this is one of the areas that we've targeted in areas of being able to build local leadership. We focus primarily on those areas of how we can include more local activities to happen, whether it's a community group, a network, an association, local government officials and bodies. It really is looking at what these communities and what these initiatives are doing at the grassroots, at the bottom level, and how we can filter this up at the national levels, regionally, as well as internationally. So we hope that this Gobeshona Global Conference is one of those steps of being able to cross-fertilize these ideas and these research and innovative evidence, and looking at how we can get this to be something that really engages at a global level, get people to talk across different continents, across different communities, and learn from experiences and activities that people are engaging in together. Next slide, please. So this year, as similar to the previous years, we run an online conference, so we're a little bit limited in quite a lot of the innovations that we can do in terms of the sessions, but we do try to make them very, very interactive, as well as have a little bit of knowledge and experience on the research and the methodologies. So we're very grateful for the number of participants and organizers that have joined for this year. Hopefully more to come throughout this year, throughout the week, sorry. So what we're hoping to do is, along with our sort of thematic sessions that we do, which focus on the 20 themes that we have across the conference, we do try and emphasize a little bit on how to make them interactive, how to get people to know a little bit more about the research topic that they're working on, and get other people to give feedback and input on what could be improved, what are areas that they could do differently if they were to do that sort of research project again, what are some of the areas that they should be highlighting and focusing on, what are some of the community knowledge that they could be including? Because oftentimes, a lot of the times what we're seeing in research activities is very empirical heavy methodologies, but that doesn't necessarily mean that local communities and local activists are really able to engage in that type of research activity. And what are the ways that we can enhance that by engaging researchers, practitioners to engage a lot more with local communities across the globe. Next slide, please. So this year, some of the new inclusions that we've been trying is, along with some of our keynotes and high levels from practitioners across the globe, we're trying a day-long activity on capacity building. So we've been trying to look at not just having sessions thematically that are presentations on research papers, on research case studies, on projects that are happening across the globe, but really using some of the capacity activities that a lot of our partners and our organizing supporters are really engaged on in enhancing local community capacity building. And so one of the experiments we're trying this year is, how do you do capacity building training sessions online? And it's really a learning curve from our side, but we'd love to have inputs from all of you that are attending these sessions, that are joining these breakout groups, that are hopefully joining in on Slido or Miro or Jamboard, whatever other interactive tools that we have. And really do feel free to give us some feedback on areas that we could be improving on, how to have an enhanced capacity building session for the next years to come through. This is something that we hope to be continuing from not just this year's conference, but going into next year as well. So there's a lot of areas that we would be like to improve on, and we're happy to take your input. So please do feel free to reach out to us with that. The other new addition that we've been looking into is what we're calling an arts and cultural session. This is something that was an idea that we've been floating around with a few of our partners that have really engaged on not only producing research papers, but research in other mediums. What are some other ways that you could really enhance the knowledge and the activities that they're working on in their projects? What are some different ways that this could be disseminated? What are some, graphical pieces, infographics, if there are any songs or any plays or skits that were written about the research, really disseminating that knowledge, breaking it down into stories, breaking it down into something that's a little bit more easier for people to digest. We're looking into experiments as to what would those sort of items be. So not only having text-based, long, lengthy research articles, PDF, that gets shared around but not necessarily read or utilized. What are some of the new knowledge products and new areas that we can be doing, focusing on arts and cultures? And what are the overlaps with local communities using these types of mediums, using these types of innovative experimental techniques in being able to disseminate the knowledge and the activities that they're doing? Next slide, please. So our partners really is one of the things that we would like to thank and champion. This conference really doesn't work without quite a lot of our supporters that are gratefully taking the time out of their regular jobs to be able to do this week-long online session that we do. So, pardon me. Those of you that aren't familiar, the Gobeshona Global Conference is truly something that it runs globally and for 24/7. So we start off with the sessions that happen in the Bangladesh time zone in day one today. And hopefully throughout the week, what we'll be having is sessions that are happening within the Asia and South Asia time zones. But as the day goes on and it becomes morning and afternoon in the Africas and the European time zones, our partners from there log in and host sessions on the content and topics that they're working on, but in their own time zone. And again, as the day flows through from there, we move on into the Americas, where again, partners and networks from there are able to join in for their thematic sessions. And then we loop back around in the next day from the Asia and the Pacific, from the Australias, back into this time zone for day two. And we do this for 24/7. So this is really something that we haven't seen happen in many other conference modes and modalities. So this is some way that we're trying to make sure that everybody is able to join in from the locality that they are. And one of the reasons that we're hopeful of bringing in more local communities and local activists to be able to be speaking, practitioners from their own experience, is that we do try and provide translation and interpretation. So one of the limitations that has been previously for quite a lot of these research conventions has been that local communities are a little bit excluded based on the location that the conferences happen or the language that they're taking place in. So we really do try to take an initiative to make sure that people are able to join in from the sessions from where they are, where they're able to join in. That's a time zone that's convenient for them, but also in the language that there is comfortable for them to speak in. So it really is enhancing the localities to be able to talk about their own experiences and share stories in their own comfort. And we're happy to provide translations and interpretations for that. So at the little bottom of the screen, you can see some of the popular trending topics that have come out of our sessions this year. So this is a word cloud that's generated by sort of taking in the descriptions, taking in the titles, taking in some of the thematic areas that our partners are going to be hosting sessions on throughout this week, and which ones have the most sort of resonance. So the word cloud with the tags on climate justice, capacity building, locally led adaptation. So hopefully for those of you that find these sessions and these topics interesting, you'll be able to join in for those sessions. For a lot of you that aren't able to join in live as the sessions are happening on Zoom, we do try after the conference to be able to record and then publish these on a public access YouTube channel, Gobeshona YouTube channel, where you'll be able to not only get this year's recordings and the thematic sessions, but also from the previous 3 years as well. So again, it's not so much about having to do everything live at the moment. It's about enhancing a discussion. It's about talking about the work that people are engaged in, the initiatives that they're taking. And then the videos are there for us to be able to use for thematic discussions and for activities throughout the year as well as knowledge products and as learning materials. Next slide, please. So without further ado, I'd like to now sort of hand over to our esteemed panel who've taken a good time to join us. So I'll be stopped screen sharing at the moment. If I could ask Ms. Sheila Patel, who is the founder and the chairperson of the Slum Dwellers International. Sheila Didi, if you'd like to start with your remarks, and if you could hand back to me at the end, please. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. And welcome everybody to this inaugural session. It reminds me of the amazing transformation that I went through when I came to the last physical Gobeshona conference in Bangladesh. It was the time when I re-met Salim again after a very long time after he left IIED. And since then, he has been, and his inspiration continues to formulate my commitments to both climate change and development. And I think that all of us who are here know that in some way or the other, Salim has inspired us, supported us, and assisted us in whatever we do that brings climate change and development investments, technology, insights, agency, and voice to communities that are vulnerable in all our countries, in all different topics that are now the 20 topics in which Gobeshona is there. Just to correct you, Saqib, I was the previous chair of STI. I have since given over to Joseph Kimani, who is now the chair, and I lead a campaign called Roof Over Our Heads. And I think that the topic of this conference is very close to my heart, because through the work that we are doing in Roof Over Our Heads, we're looking at ways by which we demonstrate the capacities of very poor women who design, construct, and finance their own homes to be able to get access to qualitative research methodologies through which they can assess the resilience index of their own homes. And we get to facilitate and work together with finance, with mayors, with construction, materials, designs, and to redevelop their homes across the world in the spirit of them driving this process. And so the theme of this organization of Gobeshona, of understanding, celebrating, and developing a deeper commitment and accountability to locally led adaptation principles is not only timely, but very, very urgent. And it's urgent because we all know that poverty is exploding exponentially in most of the countries in the global south. While the GDPs are high, the volume of poor people who are not getting benefits are increasing, and climate is exacerbating that. Too much of our own governments and international assistance produces top-down, very heavy-handed, cookie-cutter approaches, telling people that they are beneficiaries to what a global strategy wants to do for them. And we know that that fails. So having constantly championed the rights of poor communities, especially women, to celebrate what they know, to be inquisitive about what they don't know, and to systematize the manner in which they produce aggregatable knowledge that can transform the discourse on what kind of support, what kind of structured policies, what kind of measurements, and so on can be done. And I think that the locally led principles, both for how you design, execute, finance, and evaluate projects, has a very important role to play in democratizing both the development and the climate space. I feel that it's a very important thing for all of us, again, in Salim's legacy, to ensure that this just doesn't become a nice buzzword, because we now have, I think, between 150 and moving to 200 large, medium, and small organizations that have signed off on the LLA principles. Everybody says they are doing everything according to locally led adaptation. But I can tell you that from the ground where we all operate as grassroots activists, we don't see much change. We still see vertical, highly structured, risk-averse processes that are being pushed down and are evaluated on the basis of mechanisms, conceptual frameworks that are comfortable for those who designed this process. So a very important part of what we hope we will do in the next 6 days is to give not just the bare bones of what locally led adaptation should be, but to put the flesh and the life into the body of this instrument that we have created and hold each other accountable so that we take this thing, which is like a vertical top-down process, and turn it into a circle in which all voices dialogue, negotiate, and collaborate. Because if we don't collaborate, we can't heal the earth, we can't thrive ourselves or allow nature to thrive. So a very important part of this process is not only the finance that we desperately need, but a serious acknowledgement that global institutional funding has to support and entrench the transition of practices. Because ultimately, communities, cities, regions have to use the money that they have in better ways. And we globally have to support those really, really vulnerable nations for whom sometimes disaster produces deficits that are more than their GDP. So I want to end this representation that I want to make with a very strong expectation and a very strong listening and assessing mechanism by which we celebrate the right of everybody to do research, of the right to aggregate data to produce evidence that is clearly representing what communities need, want, and should have, that we repurpose resources to address the challenges that support people to do what is right, and that we don't separate development and climate, because resilience, adaptation are critical for everything that we do. So I stop there and back to you, Sakit.
Thank you so much, Sheila Didi. Apologies for the title, but also thank you so much for grounding us, for letting us know what is the real element of focusing on locally led adaptation in terms of research. And again, as being from the research community, I find ourselves to be very guilty of the fact that oftentimes when we as researchers are going into communities, engaging with them, we're very, very forthcoming about trying to do our surveys, our interviews, collecting the data. But then we go back and we write our papers and we publish it by ourselves. And there's very little involvement of the community that actually gave us their stories, gave us the information and the data, and something that we publish from. And again, I take your point that, you know, that's something that we at the research community need to be held accountable for, is working with the communities and publishing with them and getting them to actually put that research to benefit, putting it into action. And I'm happy to pledge our Gobeshona conference as a yearly marker for us to check in and make sure how we're doing on interacting with local communities that we're engaged with. Thank you so much, ma'am. So I'd now like to call on to Ms. Farah Kabir, Country Director of ActionAid Bangladesh. Farah, ma'am, if you could please open with your remarks and hand back to me at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Sakib. You know, we are having the Gobeshona conference in a sad moment because yesterday there was a major fire in Dhaka city and 45 lives were lost, and how cities have not adapted. We don't understand locally led adaptation and bringing it to the cities or building resilience. So we were in a shock and we are very sad, but this is an area where safe cities or safe communities is very important for us. Remembering Salim, and I remember from 2008 when we started working around Gobeshona, because ActionAid's approach is very much grassroots. It's about empowering women, young people, and we had the cyclone Sidor, Bangladesh being very vulnerable. We started doing Gobeshona, people's research, so that they could understand what was the issues, their vulnerability, assessment, action plans, and come up with solutions, which are now we label them as community solution, nature-based solution. But all this in Bangladesh grew from 2008. And Salim took it one step further, and he emphasized on the research component, because he was very, very committed to having research from this global south and the voices and participation of people, so that that would be taken up, not a decolonized research, if I can say something like that. And for ActionAid, we employ or we apply the method called reflection action cycle that facilitates comprehensive analysis by individuals living in poverty, focusing on power relation, rights, vulnerabilities, and risks. Through this approach, ActionAid underscores the significance of empowering local actors. And it's not just the community, it's also local administration, union porishod, or the members, especially women and youth with decision-making authority in planning, implementing, and assessing adaptation strategies. Now, ActionAid Bangladesh advocates for increased investment in local capacity buildings to manage funds, adaptation processes, aiming for sustainable and equitable outcomes. I've just come back from the north. I was in Gaibandha and Lalmonirhat, and we had done this 4-5-year project with the women and set up the agroecology school there. And the transformation is so evident. The confidence, the capacity, the ability to adapt, to come up with solutions. It's amazing. And they have diversified livelihoods. They've made connections with the market. They're ensuring that access to services and resources are there for the community. AB conducts capacity building programs, as I was saying. We train community leaders, young people, and we're trying to look at bring to the community adaptive practices such as climate resilient, sustainable agriculture, not the climate smart, because that's a catch, and that is not necessarily what we want. So we are very keen on climate resilient practices and the efforts to strengthen communities' adaptive capacity to face climate challenges. We have prioritized creating an enabling environment at the national level for fair allocation and distribution, especially for people living in poverty, women, and marginalized communities. And as you know, that we collaborated with ECAD and other experts to try and look at financing local adaptation, because we needed to invest, ensuring access for climate vulnerable people, and help to gather ground insights to develop some guidelines for equitable, transparent, and equitable, effective structures. We brought the learnings from these interactions from the service and study, and we took it to our decision makers, so that climate finance is also distributed equitably. There's justice there. In 2021, ActionAid Bangladesh released a study report titled Gender Responsive Climate Change Budgeting in Bangladesh, Exploring Opportunities Towards an Inclusive Climate Resilient Future. Now, this has also influenced our decision makers. We've been, since 2021, every year we come up with the climate budget to show what is the allocation, where it is going, how it is being utilized. And the study provided crucial evidence to inform advocacy efforts targeting key policy documents like the Bangladesh Climate Change Strategy and Action Plan, the Climate Change Gender Action Plan, at that time, the 7th five-year plan, and also the Delta Plan. Now, ActionAid Bangladesh partners with other champions and advocates for climate justice, and our studies and research are going on. Now, with ECAT, because we are totally like-minded, we have taken on the issues of local-led adaptation, community, women. We influenced ECAT to take up issues around gender and youth. And so we have had a good partnership around annual Gobeshona Global Conference as well. And this includes establishing an active community of practice, peer-to-peer learning, co-designing long-term strategy of LLA to generate knowledge and evidence on LLA. And ECAT, as it has access to global partners, I think that they provided a platform to take, to present and to share some of our learnings and studies. And the Gobeshona conference, of course, is much appreciated. And it has, as Saki, we were mentioning, brought in voices and participation of those who were not necessarily in the landscape, in the platform or at the table. And we've supported identify stakeholders in Bangladesh and Global South along with ECAT. So the Gobeshona conference does foster collective understanding and action on climate change, particularly at the local level. And there is no alternative to local institutions and communities which need to be empowered. Their voice and direct access to finance and participation in decision-making is critical to any transformation, any changes we talk. And I agree with what Sheila was saying, that the debt is increasing, climate crisis is increasing, our political actors have not necessarily adapted. In fact, we need to do a lot more to get our political actors to adapt. And the systems and structures still have inequalities when it comes to women, youth, people with special needs, marginalized ethnic communities. Transparency and accountability remains an issue. So this is why ActionAid is so engaged with community to enable them to hold their the service holders, the stakeholders, service providers accountable. So, it's not about somebody going from the national level or global level and holding our systems or our political actors accountable. It's the community itself. And this is where women and young people play an amazing role. We have seen the change. I was, as I was saying, I was in Lalmorin and Gaibandha, and they were very clear as to the transformation needed, the local-led adaptation efforts, and where they wanted to go and how they were progressing and how they were holding the political actors accountable. So grassroots leaders should have meaningful representation in decision-making processes related to entire economic, social, cultural empowerment, but in this case to adaptation funding, climate funding. And we have to be careful because the climate finance has its own politics, and it is not easy for women, young people to access any of those funds. And it's being presented as a matter of compliance and accountability, but alternatives have not been provided so that women-headed organization, young people's organization can access this. And that is not going to lead us to the solution. So we need that understanding and that trust building among the community, among the NGOs, research organization, leading to that change in the culture, in the practice, and protect local actors from harmful pressures, from climate extremes, so that we can, we still suffering from, we have not met our 2-degree target, 1.5-degree target. So we are living in a world that's going through extreme weathers, and we can't even anticipate what else is going to happen. So without collective action, without women and youth in the center, we will not be able to make the changes. Back to you, Saket.
Thank you, ma'am, and I really appreciate the grounding that you have provided as well. And I think, again, some of the lessons that you spoke about in terms of engaging communities for some of the reports and research activities that you've done, but taking them to decision makers and policy makers, the ones that are going to be implementing the changes and going to have to bring in the newer projects and initiatives coming forward. I think that is a lesson and a learning that quite a lot of our participants during the conference would be very keen on engaging with. So I hope that they'll be able to join in on your sessions and be able to get a little bit of an insight as to some of the challenges that it has been for working with communities and taking voices to the policymakers and decision tables. So I'm really keen on some of the activities that we're working on. And again, as you mentioned, there's still quite a lot more to be done. The national plans and policies that we do have in place oftentimes get done in a very sort of holistic, quote unquote, manner where they're trying to add in quite a lot, but these local voices, these local champions, the youth and the gender representation is usually half a paragraph and a chapter that needs to come in later, and an analysis report that they do as an ad hoc on top. So maybe that's a way for us to be able to engage with these policymakers at the opening of these policies and strategies, and include these local community voices and local activist activities in the planning at the beginning stage. So then the plans and the strategies that do come out are reflexive and responsive to the local challenges that they have to face. So thank you for that, ma'am. I'd now like to move on to Mr. Ghulam Rabbani, who is the head of the Climate Bridge Fund Secretariat at BRAC. Rabbani bhai, if you could hand back to me at the end of your remarks, please. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Saqib. Thank you very much for inviting me to join this opening session of the fourth Gobeshona International Conference. And as Shiladi and also Farapa mentioned, it is a very critical moment for all of us. But for me, it's very critical because I still remember how the Dr. Salim Ul Haq used to be excited on the first day of any international conference. I can remember the first international conference on community-based adaptation that he organized in 2005, and then we continued till his last breath. So it's very critical moment for me, and we all miss him with heavy heart. But I'm quite happy, that his knowledge initiatives are being, continued to contribute adaptation knowledge system by ICAD. So from core of my heart, I congratulate, ICAD and your team, Saqib. But let me just share some of the the experiences that we have in promoting locally led adaptation and also implementing locally led adaptation at BRAC side. While there are quite number of programs, relevant programs that are implementing this LLA principles in their projects and programs, but let me give you very recent 3 examples that BRAC is actually following and implementing it. The first one is, as you know, the Climate Bridge Fund, which was established in 2019 with support from the government of Germany through KfW. So this is one of the examples. And the second example, which is not very old, it is Pool Fund, supported by Global Affairs Canada and Australian and Australian government. And third most important and very recent initiative, is Bangladesh America Moitri activity, which is supported by USAID. So these are the 3 financial mechanism that BRAC has initiated over the last 5 years, if I can say. But the main target of this 3 mechanism, is to strengthen the localization process, strengthen the capacity of the local organizations so that they can deal with the humanitarian crisis, climate change, and other development challenges. So that's the the core part of BRAC that I see. But if I may share some of the examples from Climate Bridge Fund, how Climate Bridge Fund is actually aligned with the different LLA principles, at least sharing some of the examples with you at this opening session. The first one is, if you look at the first principle of locally led adaptation is in a lowest level decision-making process. And, Farapa also emphasized a bit about it. We have a number of criteria, institutional criteria and project-related criteria, to have access to climate risk fund. If an organization is interested to submit a project, they have to consult with the target communities and local stakeholders, local authorities during the design of the project. And that is a mandatory criteria. So without, doing it, you cannot submit a concept note, to have access to climate risk fund. And we don't really stop, at that point. What we do from the Secretariat also initiated due diligence process whether the information provided in the concept note was correct or not. So we go to the target communities again, and we also discuss. We consult with the target communities whether these problems and needs are real, and how do you really, address these needs and problems. So this is one thing that I can immediately, mention. Then what is the lesson, that we have from this implementation process? This consultation at the target communities at the local level with the local stakeholders really help to smoothly implementation of the project. And this is very cost effective. I can give you example. Recently, some of the projects are ended and they have finished their 3 years, project period. And those who really consulted with these communities and designed their project could end their project on time. Okay, so this is one of the lessons, important lessons that we have learned. And on the second, LLA principles that I can share a bit is in terms of predictable and easy access to the finance. If you look at the operational modality of the finance, CVF mechanism itself a sustainable mechanism. Why we are calling it as a sustainable mechanism? Because the capital fund, is invested in a treasury bond, and we are using the income of the investment, to support the projects. So this is how, we are trying to continue, for long-term supporting to the NGOs, local level NGOs, so that they can implement the adaptation actions on the ground. But the lessons that we see is like, the model works very well, but needs sufficient resources for investment. So if you invest more resources, you get more income, you can support more projects. And currently, if I give you statistics, we received 59 project ideas this year under the fourth call, and we can support only 4 projects. That's what I see. And on the first year, we received 102 project ideas, project concepts, and we could support only 4 projects, which is less than 3% of the needs. So that's what, you can see. So in terms of predictable finance, we are, of course, trying to do it, make it sustainable, but at the same time, resources are limited. So that's our learning that we see. Regarding structural inequalities that, Farapa was focusing, I would like to specifically mention here that in the 4th call under CVF mechanism, we make sure that the project ideas that will be submitted to CVF has to be gender responsive. So under this 4th call, we have 2 mandatory criteria. First criteria is the consultation with the local community, and the second mandatory criteria is the gender responsive project. And what does it mean for us? I'm not a gender expert, but to tell you what we did from our end is, if you have 2 objectives, if you have 3 objectives of the projects at the beginning, at least one of the objective has to highlight explicitly gender-related activities, and this has to be aligned with the outputs and the activities. So this is the the mandatory criteria that we have put under the fourth call. So based on the lessons in the first, second, and third call, so that has to be done. But it doesn't mean that we did not really integrate gender aspects in our earlier calls. In earlier calls, we encouraged them to keep at least 50% women beneficiaries in their projects. But this time we are doing two. You have to keep maximum beneficiaries as women, and also the activity and the objective and the output level gender issues need to be integrated. So this is the third issue, and the fourth but most important issue that I would like to mention here is the integration of science. We are calling it locally led adaptation, but it does not limit that. You have to consult with local local communities, target communities, local authorities. It also encourages that the adaptation science and integration of climate projections are really integrated when you design a project and implement a project and monitor a project. So these four things, at least, we are trying to, implement in our current CBF mechanism. I stop here, and I give it back to Saqib. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbani Bhai. And it's really, really encouraging to see how your fund has actually been putting some of the lessons that you've been learning into action, and very, very reflexively learning from it as you're going. And I believe all of us that are aware of your fund will be looking at your upcoming proposals and call for proposals. So please do feel free to share it with us if we can share it to a wider network around. And also engaging how we can actually have some of this innovative funding mechanisms be replicated. As you mentioned, not one fund is going to be able to answer to all the calls that are necessary. So it's really, really important for us to sort of look at different financing structures, different financing frameworks, and what are the different ways that we can actually get locals to have a lot more budgetary access and a lot more control about the funding that they're working with, and see it come more reliably and predictably, and be able to monitor that in a collaborative manner with communities, as well as not just researchers and practitioners, but also the development partners, the ones that are actually giving the funding, and looking at how we can make this into a more cohesive sort of ecosystem of working on climate actions. So we're very, very encouraged by a lot of the progress that you're having, and all the successes to you. So I'll now move on to our fifth speaker, Mr. Julien Der, who is the head of the economic department of the Embassy of France in Bangladesh. Julien, if you could please head back to me at the end of your remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Saqib. So let me start on behalf of the French Embassy, congratulate ICAD for, I think it's been 10 years you're organizing Gobeshona, and now you're going more and more global. So congratulations for that. And of course, like the previous panelists, to pay a tribute, of course, of Dr. Huck. I had myself the occasion to be in Gobeshona in person in 2020 when I was here for the first time. So it was really important event for me at the time as well. Maybe, of course, unlike others, I'm not quite an expert, and you're all brilliant experts and activists. So maybe a humble contribution on my side. I wanted to keep it very short, but so many things have been said that I want to react on some of them. Maybe I will take a little step back, both in time and in the frame, to address the issue that has been raised by two of the panelists regarding the access to climate finance, and how through the LLA principle you can enhance preparedness and ensure timely implementation of the project. I would say from the French side, this issue or topic surrounding international financial architecture has taken a momentum last year in June in Paris, when we organized the Paris Summit for the new Global Finance Pact. Some of you here, some of the panelists had the occasion to be here. I was not there myself, but the idea there was to build on the feeling that the output of this architecture does not match the collective ambition regarding financing both mitigation and adaptation, and what would be the reforms that are needed, also from the donor side, from the multilateral lenders, to ensure that the money really goes up to the most vulnerable community to address the issue on the ground. So at this occasion, I believe around 48 countries endorsed the Paris Pact for the People and the Planet, what we call the 4 Ps. And Bangladesh is one of them. So I would like also to thank Bangladesh for joining us in this journey. It really, the platform in the 4P really aims to have a political discussion also at the global level to share the ambition on increasing the financing for the development, for addressing nature needs and climate, but also to shape a more inclusive and effective architecture globally, ensuring this money will go at the right place. So that was happening in June, and maybe, of course, from the global, I would like to tackle the issue. I mean, what we are doing in Bangladesh, because this has an impact globally also on our side and the French side, because what we are doing currently in Bangladesh on the adaptation is really a laboratory for us on what how we can address adaptation with the whole of society approach. So just to remind those that were not aware, so the French president visited Bangladesh in September and had this first-hand experience about this advanced level in the experience in the area of LLA. I mean, not only the experience, but also how you materialize it concretely. And so hearing from some of the from the experts that are here in Bangladesh, you offered Bangladesh to enter into a bilateral adaptation pact. So France, Bangladesh to support truly bottom-up and whole of society approach, involving the government, the civil society, the youth, the women, all together to frame this pact. So it's not only, I mean, it's also how you can, change the methodology on how you build the pact, which is usually built in between two governments. This way, it was really from the very inception, everybody building what would be the pact and how this will be implemented. So that was in September. I think this was genuinely linked to the adoption by our French development agency to the LLA principles in COP28. It was one of the first development banks to do so. I must stress that it's really challenging because it's also very different from how institutions like AFD is usually working in the way they finance projects. But the idea here, and during COP28, I would like to mention that also. So we announced a sizable contribution to the loss and damage fund, which is to somehow, it has a continuum, not only adaptation, but there is a continuum between mitigation, adaptation, and loss and damage. So now we have AFD adopted the LLA. We're trying to see how we can use the Bangladesh as a pioneer, since you're already a pioneer in LLA, how we can all together understand how we should work better in between lenders and, international community and the most vulnerable to ensure an adequate adaptation of the country. Maybe just to conclude, to say a word about where we stand on this adaptation pact. So it's still under finalization. We would like to, we committed 1 billion euro financing that should be for a 5-year period of time, only for Bangladesh. And really like to thank the significant inputs from the civil society, from the academia, from the youth on this particular pact. We will leverage on some existing tool that we have. Our French Development Agency, they have an existing adaptation tool where we can provide support on understanding, planning, and investing on adaptation. And we put the emphasis in where we stand here in the negotiation on the LAME framework. So to ensure, working on the learning, accountability, monitoring, and evaluation, and at all stage how we can incorporate the communities in all aspects of the projects that will be tackled at this moment under the pact. Of course, the idea is also to strengthen one objective of the government of Bangladesh to build locally led adaptation hubs. That will be a major tool to leverage how we can go up to the community level. Bangladesh aims at establishing 100% coverage of LLA hubs. So this is really something that will be embedded in the pact. And maybe one last point, of course, Bangladesh being a laboratory and having so much experience in LLA and adaptation, how we can work together on this South-South-North cooperation that ICAD have been so much involved in. So we are looking forward to do that. Maybe just one last point, because this has not been mentioned so far, but we need to also address private sector financing, also on the adaptation and also using the LLA principles. So we had some couple of discussion recently with the private sector, with the banking sector here, with Bangladesh, I mean, the central bank here in Bangladesh, on how we can work together to identify what would be for them a bankable project, how we can work with de-risking tools and guarantee to ensure that bank will also contribute to the effort. There, we're also working with the European Union on Green Bond Initiative globally, with 6 countries, including Bangladesh. And in this initiative, 60% of the allocation will go to adaptation. So that's all on my side. Thank you, Sakib.
Thank you, Julian, and also encouraged by the words that you have shared in terms of the pact that you mentioned between the French government as well as the government of Bangladesh. And you're quite right in mentioning that oftentimes these are bilateral agreements and pacts that are done, treaties that are signed between governments, and then it filters out at some point to communities, to private sector, to organizations within the two nations. And this is really something that this particular pact has done from the very beginning. It's brought in those sorts of communities and those voices in at the very early stages of planning on how best to interact with these. And then the agreement is more of a sort of whole of society approach between the French society as well as the Bangladesh society. So we're very, very keen on engaging and seeing how we can enhance that sort of collaboration and cooperation. And you're quite right, it's something that we would like to see happening in quite a lot of different contexts, and that learning is something that's very important for us to also document, to see how these sorts of initiatives and collaborations can be enhanced in future. So thank you so much, Julian. I'd like to now turn over to our sixth speaker, Mr. Jan Warmbak, who's the policy specialist and the COP focal point for the Swedish International Development Cooperation Agency. Jan, floor is yours. Please hand back to me at the end of your remarks.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Sakib. And thank you so much for the opportunity to share a little bit of SIDA's views and work. And I wanted to start off by saying that the SIDA is promoting locally led adaptation, increasingly so since 2021, when we signed up for the principles, Sweden and SIDA. But working at SIDA, it felt like it was not a new thing. It felt that we already before worked to direct the climate finance and capacity development to both local and subnational level. I mean, to strengthen local actors through knowledge, tools, and resources. So it was very much in line with what we already did, and a little bit with the DNA of SIDA's way of working. The Swedish government at this time is prioritizing to increase climate finance and locally led climate adaptation initiatives, and to provide local institutions with more direct access to climate finance is one way, or one of the ways SIDA will work to deliver on this Swedish government priority. And that is in order to both make it more effective and also try to increase climate finance. And a few examples of what SIDA has done so far. I mean, we have supported the work of IIED and the work with Life AR, for instance. We are looking at how, and now with Life AR is evolving, how we perhaps can also support it bilaterally in the countries where it has come a little bit further. Furthermore, we also have support to UNCDF and the program Local, and that is in several countries. And another very good example is the program financing locally led climate action FLOCA that is undertaken in Kenya. It's co-financed with the government of Kenya, the World Bank, and Sweden and Denmark. And I do believe that there are ongoing discussions of possibilities to perhaps also expand it to Bangladesh based on the experiences in Kenya. So that is one of the flagship programs that we have, more or less, you can say, in this area. So as Sakib mentioned, I'm also being part of the Swedish delegation to the UNFCCC, and that means also being part of EU. And as Sweden is negotiating through EU, I follow the work of national adaptation plans. So I wanted to connect back a little bit to the COP process and the upcoming COP 29. Within the EU group, I see there is a little bit of a need perhaps to sort out terminology. EU is very much supportive, I would say, of the LLA principles or the LLA way of working, but there is a kind of a bit of a glitch there that on the wording. They are not so keen on using locally led adaptation, but rather locally owned adaptation. It's something we are working on, but I mean, if you also in any ways come across this, perhaps try to take the discussion with the EU countries to see if it's possible to sort out, because I think it would be good if we use the same kind of terminology when we are talking about the same things. So to say a little bit of how I see the work, I mean, the more example that we see of this kind of projects, locally led adaptation as a viable way forward, you know, supported both by donors, partners, but not least also governments, because governments is crucial here to accept to have this kind of devolved climate finance and making sure to let financing reach the local level and let people be part of formulating the actions they want to do. So governments are really, we need them on board here. And so I mean, this can help us, I would say, and I think it then could be a more viable way forward, the more good examples we had. So I just wanted to end by saying for COP29, I think there's good possibilities to get locally led adaptation even more on the agenda, and we all have to work together to make that happen. So thank you so much, and back to you, Sakib.
Thank you, Jan. And again, also thanks to you for framing the fact that there are bigger discussions at the global level, at the convention level, that are happening, that are really trying to bring in locally led adaptation into some of the newer texts and the treaties that are coming out of the COPs. And truly, the previous COP, just at COP28, where they have now opened the floor for evidence cases for adaptation to be able to frame the adaptation framework, as they're calling it. I believe quite a lot of our participants and our organizers are engaged in that, trying to make submissions so that we're really able to put locally led adaptation, or locally owned adaptation as the EU terminology is, for how to frame that better from the convention, how to have more concrete sort of implementation guidelines and activities coming from the treaty, so that we're able to really filter them down into the country level. But as you mentioned, again, from the activities of CEDA, from which we've also been working and collaborating here in Bangladesh, it's also important for us to do it from the country, from the bottom up as well, and working particularly on communities, working particularly with youth and young women, particularly in enhancing their engagement in decisions and designing policies and adaptation activities. So thank you for that. Unfortunately, our next speaker, Ms. Runa Khan, who's the founder and executive director of Friendship NGO, was not able to join us in person, but she's been very kind enough to be able to give us a the recording. So if I could just ask my team to play the recording for now.
Honorable participants of the Gobeshona Global Conference 2024. Before I can even begin, I'm overwhelmed with the memories of Professor Salim-ul Haq, Salim Bhai, a friend, towering over all of us as an incredible voice fighting for our world of tomorrow, the climate, its impact on humanity and life. Trying to find solution, his contributions had profoundly given shape to sharing our understanding and approach to locally led adaptation. His legacy continues to inspire us all. Thank you for the invitation to share Friendship's learning of 22 years of working and developing systemic solutions for climate migrants, millions of them. We are an example of an organization where LLA has been part of our daily routine, and that is how important it is for everyone who needs to imbue climate adaptation, mitigation, and solutions for rebuilding lives for those impacted by climate, environment, and poverty on this planet today. We cannot presume to work with quality, impact, sustainability without this, the 8 elements of LLA integrated as a thread into our work. How can quality health touching millions every year, from reconstructive surgery to ensuring desalinated water to protect the unborn, work and be sustainable if communities are not on board with confidence and respect at its implementation? How can one find confidence and power in themselves to be able to access government services and available systems unless you can reach the communities beyond just project implementation? Our commitment to empowering communities to lead their life with dignity, bringing opportunity and hope to every life touched over 22 years through systemic change in delivery of education, resources for entrepreneurship, all needed deep links to the community voices, starting from ethical, need-based solutions. Communities are societies. These societies need respect and dignity to be able to live their life in migrancy. Adaptation can only happen when the integrity and impact of projects are not compromised in the way they are implemented, designed by either lack or overflow of funds, integrity in understanding of the socio-economic political environment. And who knows this better but the communities themselves? Funding is required. We need voices, we need solutions, we need to show efficiency and prove trustworthiness in the usage of funds. Addressing the pivotal challenge of unlocking finances for LLA necessities, we need innovative ways, collaborative approaches, and Friendship's collaboration with ICAD and the Gobeshona platform exemplifies ways the LLA principles are practically daily used for millions of lives in the harsh climate impacted environment. LLA emphasizes the critical role of local communities, organization, and gauge our progress, share insights in government decision making, and refine our strategies towards more effective climate adaptation processes for a sustainable future. And as we look towards COP29, our collective aspirations for LLA are clear. We envision a global commitment that places local communities at the heart of adaptation strategies, supported by a robust financing mechanism, policies that empower them to navigate their climate resilience journey. This commitment we must be able to translate it and its tangible, collaborative support the communities to adapt to the changing climate on their terms, leveraging their knowledge, strengths, and innovations. We need to embark on this endeavor together. Thank you.
Thank you, Runa ma'am. We're sorry you weren't able to join us in live, but very grateful that you could send us your remarks, and in particular for highlighting a critical issue such as climate-induced migration, which is really going to be a pressing urgency that's going to be coming up, and quite a lot of the current policies and strategies that are in place in any country are not really able to sort of address that adequately. So it really is a point that you've highlighted that we should be looking into, and we're happy to collaborate in looking at how we can best be responsive to the coming crisis that might be there. So last but not least, I'd like to go to our eighth speaker, Mr. Shohanur Rahman, who is the Chief Executive for YouthNet for Climate Justice. Shohan, if you're done, please hand back to me when you're end of your remarks, please. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sakib Bhai. And I am the eighth speaker, and we know the LLA has an 8 principle, and it's a great honor to join the Gobeshona Global Conference. And our Professor Salimul Haq sir was the great supporter for youth-led climate justice movement, climate justice campaign. And we believe we are continuing Salimul Haq sir legacy, and he is present with us with our action in the grassroots level. And I can remember collaborating with Salimul Haq sir for the Gobeshona Global Conference in amplifying voice through Twitter, as well as to joining Paris Summit for Global Financial Pact Summit, as well as to joining the French President Macron to start a bilateral pact between Bangladesh and France. So we are looking forward for a transformative adaptation. And for Bangladesh, or who are the from most affected communities, like my community, I am from a small village of Jalukati district of Borishal. So it's our daily routine. Yes, it's our daily task to adapt with the changing climate. And sometimes we are the beyond adaptation when we are facing loss and damage, you know. And when we are talking about the locally led adaptation, so it means the leadership of the local people, you know, everyone. So it's not just engaging them. So we are engaging them through some consultation. It will be the local engaging adaptation. But when we are talking about the locally led adaptation, it means empowerment of the local people, leadership development of local people, and shifting the power to the local people. That's means local people will develop their adaptation plan, their action plan, and not only project development or program developing, as well as the control of financial resources should be given them. So we can start through locally planned adaptation, locally owned adaptation, locally managed adaptation, but true adaptation will be that one when the local people can decide their adaptation plan, they can allocate their resources on their own adaptation, and local government has a crucial role in LLA. We know the CVA. So CVA's local people are leading, but that time the local government like Union Council or municipality was excluded or not in the facilitator roles. So how Union Council or city corporation can facilitate their local adaptation plan. So I want to share some youth-led action here. So we know young people are raising voice in COP meeting or climate strike. They are advocating with policymaker. But Salim sir, every time, pushed us or influenced us to do something in the ground with the front line. So we are empowering the frontliner young people like Shatkira or Kurigram or the last mile. So we started our journey with ICAT, like Voice from Frontline or Resilience Academy. And then also we get some support from British Council named COP26 Youth Engagement Challenge Fund. So we engaged grassroots young people to getting the local stories, to engage the local administration, how a city like Borishal can be climate migrants friendly city, engaging the local policymaker also. And day by day we joined some adaptive project. So when we are talking adaptation project program, that should be adaptive. And when they build partnership with local actors, so not only blaming them through due diligence that they have not capacity. So when you are conducting due diligence, you know the lack of capacity of the local player. So you should plan how you can enhance their capacity, like financial. Like when we are applying for this year, so we are hearing that vulnerable countries, they are not capable to deliver a project. So vulnerable will be sometimes lack of capacity. So our mission should be how we can support them, not blaming them they're not capacitated. So through our programming, especially from ICAD Innovation Fund this year, we started to translating LLA principle to the most affected communities like Shamnagar. So young people saying that they are very well known about adaptation, they hear adaptation, but they never thought about the LLA. So when they are hearing the LLA in Bengali, and we also supporting some union council, especially a project from Islamic Relief and BCAS. So how the young people can be part of the local adaptation plan of action, LAPA, and not only joining consultation, how they can contribute to implement of the local adaptation plan of action, how they can monitor, how they can evaluate. So when you're talking about the LLA, that's mean local people, especially who are in LLA principle 2, that means who are facing systematic barrier. So we are asking for system change, but we young people, women, marginalized community, indigenous, transgender, we are facing systematic barrier and we are excluded from the mainstream. So we are thinking if we can engage some women, some youth, some social people, that will be inclusive. But are we shifting the leadership to them? So it's a very crucial to shifting leadership to the youth and marginalized people. So we are advocating with the Union Council how the young people, because for climate change we have no architecture in Bangladesh to address adaptation or resilience, but we have the disaster architecture. So we are engaging local young people in the disaster management standing committee, how they can support, how they can provide input to establish or implement the local adaptation plan of action, as well as evaluation. And last one, we started another transformative project in Kurigram. So we awarded a very small funding from British High Commission, is honor of the King Charles, is from the King's birthday party. So we invested that small money to Kurigram to enhancing local leadership, building partnership of Jatrapur Union Council of the in Kurigram, and we supported local community to develop their own adaptation plan. So that adaptation plan will be owned by the Union Council annual development programming as well as budget. And then we are organizing a chort summit in that chort to share local people's demands and chort declaration. So we have huge responsibility as young people to take local action, to advocate with policymakers, to join climate movement. But the investment is very slow, very little for adaptation, for local adaptation, for the youth-led organization. So we are looking at transformative LLA, and day by day, Bangladesh is joining Adaptation Pact, or ADB and Bangladesh also adopting the LLA framework. So how that can be coordinated, comprehensive to include all, and for research perspective, we need climate is a scientific issue, so it should be science-backed, but LLA also highlighting local knowledge, indigenous knowledge, traditional knowledge. So how also we can mix the scientific knowledge as well as the traditional and indigenous knowledge, avoiding loss and damage, avoiding the maladaptation. And local universities, they also can be supportive to enhancing, evaluating, monitoring, or learning cascading through for LLA. And last one, civil society, local young people has crucial role to accountability. Like we introduce youth-led social audit. So that can be introduced a long run for achieving true LLA. Thank you, Sakib. Over to you.
Thank you, Shahanur. And I really echo some of the points that you've made in terms of all the local stakeholders that oftentimes don't get involved except for just a sort of consultation, particularly local government and local communities and associations. And it's really, really encouraging quite a lot of the work that you've been doing in engaging with some local officials and government bodies, as well as communities and networks that you're in. And hopefully that's also something that we will be able to take forward as we get into these national plannings, as you mentioned, the Adaptation Pact, as well as the LLA framework. Well, how do we fit in these local bodies that have already existed? How do we ensure that their capacity is enhanced? And I mentioned enhanced because it's not, as you mentioned, that these local communities and local organizations are not doing anything and that they don't have the capacity to do. You're obviously doing quite a lot with whatever meager resources you're able to get. So it's about enhancing that capacity. It's about making sure that you're able to get the resources to support you, to take the work further, and to be able to bring in more of the stakeholders from the local communities involved into it in a meaningful way. So really, thank you for framing that in that way. So thankfully, thank you to all our panelists and to all our distinguished guests and our participants primarily. Thank you all for joining us on an evening in Friday in Bangladesh, where it's a weekend, and hopefully starting a weekend wherever else you are in the world. I'd also, just before we end and thank our panelists, like to mention just in the chat, if my colleagues could paste in the upcoming sessions from our panelists that are coming. If we could put that into the chat for everybody, so that anybody that's participating, looking at this session online on Facebook, please do remember to register. Our conference registration is still open. It remains open up until the very last moment of our closing session. We try to keep it open and free for everybody to join. So if you haven't already done so, please go into the agenda, find their session, register, so it adds it to your calendar, and you're able to join in on the discussions on the day when they're having it. And feel free to use the community boards on our conference platform, as well as any of our social media pages, to get in touch with us and give us any of your inputs and feedback. And hopefully next year, maybe perhaps if you weren't able to do a session this year, next year will be your turn. Please feel free to reach out to us and engage with us on that. So on behalf of us here at ICAD and our family here working on the conference, we're very, very grateful for all of you taking the time to join us on the panel, and all of our organizers for this year's conference. I wish you all a fruitful discussion. Looking forward to the exciting week coming ahead. Thank you so much. We'll end on that.